Greetings, my fellow freaks and weirdos, I'm Tom and welcome to Monster Gab, where we love to talk about classic and vintage horror. And in today's episode, I want to share with you what I believe are the top 10 very best TIGON horror movies. Earlier this year, I covered the best Hammer and Amicus horror movies. Check those out if you haven't done so already. In one of those videos, I joked that Amicus was a poor man's Hammer, which is totally unfair, but if true, I suppose you could say that TIGON is a poor man's Amicus. After all, TIGON were a British film company, mostly known for their horror movies during the 60s and 70s. And though these movies were made to compete with those made by Hammer and Amicus, TIGON's movies were mostly made on a low budget. As a company, TIGON not only made movies, but distributed movies too, including a handful of horror titles such as Castle of the Living Dead, Terror Creatures from the Grave, The Nude Vampire, The Flesh and Blood Show, A Candle for the Devil, possibly others too, I'm not sure. Seeing as these movies were only distributed by TIGON, I've not included them in my list, as I want to focus on the movies that TIGON made and or produced. But that leaves me with a conundrum, because it appears that TIGON only really made around 10 horror movies, meaning they all make the list. That doesn't necessarily mean they're all good, I guess it's just a case of ranking them in order. In my opinion, TIGON made some pretty great horror movies, but they also made their fair share of stinkers too. And remember, this is all just my opinion, and you are entitled to yours, so don't get your underwear in a twist. It's not good for the fabric.
Number 10.
Blood Beast Terror, 1968. Also known as The Vampire Beast Craves Blood, Blood Beast from Hell, and Death's Head Vampire. I apologise right now to anyone who likes this movie. I personally don't. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, not by a long shot, but I don't think it's good, and I certainly couldn't recommend it. Inspector Quinnell, played by Peter Cushing, is investigating a string of murders in 19th century Britain when a mad ranting witness describes the killer to be a huge winged creature. Although the movie plays out like a mystery, it is heavily implied that a professor of entomology has created a giant, human flesh-eating death's head moth. Yeah, that's right, a giant moth. The moth part doesn't bother me. I've seen movies about giant killer ants, lizards, plants, and so on. But the movie doesn't seem to do anything. It's just one big investigation until we see the reveal of this creature, which is terribly underwhelming. And I don't just mean it hasn't aged well. I don't particularly think this looked good in its day. This film does have some good-looking scenes, some that are reminiscent of something from a Hammer horror movie, and one that features a bunch of people who put on a horror-themed stage play that goes on for far, far too long. At least 5 solid minutes! Though the play itself is quite possibly better than the entire movie. And yes, it stars the legendary Peter Cushing, who still delivers a decent enough performance. But even his quality of acting doesn't rescue this turd of a movie. In fact, he quoted himself it was the worst movie he's ever starred in. What do you guys think? Do you like this movie? I personally found it a hard watch, but that's just me.
Number 9.
Virgin Witch, 1972. Lots of boobs in this one. Lots and lots of boobies. How is this not my number one choice? Amongst TIGON's many distributed movies were a lot of sexploitation titles. Virgin Witch is a movie they made, and it's a combination of both sexploitation and horror. It stars Vicky and Anne Michelle, who play the roles of sisters Betty and Christine. Christine has landed a career as a glamorous beauty model, and the two sisters are invited to a country home for a photo shoot. But this is also home to a coven of witches, where Christine takes part in a sabbath and develops a hunger for control with a desire to become their high priestess. She also appears to have psychic abilities and other supernatural powers, which she abuses to get exactly what she wants. I've seen this film a couple of times, and there are some good things worth noting. There's a story and a plot, though a bit vague, is still interesting enough. Christine's abilities are worrisome, and the Sabbaths, though described to be rituals of goodness and enlightenment, are deviously unsettling. But the movie as a whole is marred by excessive amounts of sex and nudity. It's basically the main focus of the movie and its selling feature. It's almost like watching softcore porn. I've no doubt in its day this was considered to be shocking, daring, raunchy, exciting, but I don't think it's aged well, and watching this movie today, all of those scenes come across as cheap, tacky and seedy. In the modern world we live in, if you want to see naked breasts or other body parts and sexual activity, there are plenty of other avenues you can find it. Some of it well produced too. So I've heard. Listen, I'm not a prude, okay? I'm not offended by any of that stuff, and I even find some of the women in this movie to be quite attractive. But sexploitation doesn't make a good horror movie, and if you were to take all of that away from Virgin Witch, you will be left with a very hollow experience. And though I said there were some good moments, they're not enough for me to call this a good horror movie. But what do you think?
Number 8.
Haunted House of Horror, 1969. Do I like this movie? Yes, actually, yes I do. So, do I think it's a good movie? Probably not. No, I don't think so. But it does have its fans, and like I said, I do like it, so I won't be too harsh on this one. It's the 1960s. A group of young adults are at a house party, but they're bored. They want to do something different and exciting, so they trespass onto an old abandoned house with a murderous history that's supposedly haunted, in the hope they might encounter a ghost. But instead, people start getting killed off one by one, and rather than do the sensible thing and contact the police, the remaining members go all Scooby-Doo and try to figure out who the killer is. I don't think it's a spoiler, perhaps more of a heads up to say there are no ghosts in this film, despite its slightly misleading title. This is simply a guess who the killer is kind of movie, which is fine, except it's poorly written, with a script and story that seems a bit erratic. Some of the characters show signs of having backstories that don't amount to anything and don't seem relevant to the movie. And though interestingly enough it stars American singer, actor and teen heartthrob Frankie Avalon, most of the acting in this movie is not great. But I do like this movie, perhaps not for the right reasons, but it is a guilty pleasure of mine. That's because this movie is a time capsule that's captured some of the essence of 1960s Britain and 1960s culture. The fashion, the trends and the clothing, the hairstyles, the cars, the music, even the devices the music is played on, the people, the attitudes, the choice of wording and language. And because this movie was made in the 1960s and not a period piece, it all feels authentic. Well, not that I'd know, I wasn't there, but still, it's great to see. And despite what I said about the acting, I kind of like the characters in this one, even if some of them are a bit two-dimensional. As a horror movie though, it's not scary, not at all. Well, not to me anyway. It does feel like a live-action Scooby-Doo for grown-ups, but there's a handful of half-decent on-screen kills and a couple of creepy seances. Or maybe just the one, I can't remember. Apparently, David Bowie was lined up to feature in this movie, but was advised not to as it may have affected his career. And though I fully understand why, and agree with that decision, I could totally picture David Bowie in this film. I won't argue with anyone who says Haunted House of Horror is a bad movie, nor could I fully recommend it. But I deem it better than the first two movies on my list, and it is one that I can rewatch over time.
Number 7.
The Beast in the Cellar, 1971. Okay, we're picking up the pace a little bit now as the pendulum is slowly swinging towards the territory of good films. Beryl Reid and Flora Robson play the roles of two sweet elderly sisters, Ellie and Joyce, who live near a rural army base located in acres of surrounded woodland where soldiers have been mauled to death by what's predicted to be a large wildcat or leopard. The killings of these soldiers are soon connected with the home of the two sisters, or more so, a living creature they keep locked away in the depths of their cellar. This is very different to your traditional styles of horror. Besides a savage death at the beginning, this movie has no gore, no scares, or any real feeling of tension. Instead, this movie is very dialogue driven and focuses on telling a story, especially the backstory of Ellie and Joyce. For traditional horror fans, this just won't fly, and admittedly, it is a very slow burn. But if you appreciate good acting, there is a lot to admire. It does feel like watching a theatrical stage play at times. Beryl Reid and Flora Robson are splendid in their roles and really display true talents in acting. They have a lot of lines to recite, but deliver them perfectly, and you really get to know their characters and the nature of their characters. You also get to know their history, the events they've been through, and how it's affected them, as well as their reasons for keeping something alive in the cellar. There are some nice shots of British countryside, and the movie itself feels quintessentially British. Otherwise, this is not a visual horror movie. The horror is really within the dialogue and the story. And there's an interesting outcome too, but you'll have to watch it to find out for yourselves. Perhaps not for everyone, but this is still a good movie, and one that I could recommend depending on a select audience.
Number 6.
Neither the Sea Nor the Sand, 1972. First of all, I cannot talk about this movie without giving away any spoilers, so if you haven't seen it and wish to do so, feel free to stop this video and come back to it later. Secondly, this is an extremely acquired taste. I don't know anybody personally that I could recommend this movie to. In fact, if I was to recommend it to you guys, I guarantee the majority of you will come back to me and say it was an awful movie and that it's time you will never get back. But I really like this movie. Now, just because I like a movie doesn't mean that it's good, but I hand on heart do believe that this is a good movie. It's just, like I said, an acquired taste. This is the stinky feet blue cheese of horror movies. Some people like that stuff. I like it, but not everybody does. I'm not trying to sell this movie to you, but consider this your last warning. If you'd like to see the movie first, go ahead and do so. Otherwise, let's talk about it. As far as slow burners are concerned, this movie is very slow. And as far as horror is concerned, the elements of horror are quite minimal and not particularly scary, or in this case, just different perhaps. As far as subgenres are concerned, you could call this romantic horror, I suppose. Susan Hampshire plays Anna Robinson. Trapped in a loveless marriage, she leaves her husband to visit the Isle of Jersey, or the Bailiwick of Jersey if you want to be official about it. For those who don't know, Jersey is a self-governed British island south of England that's actually closer to France than it is the UK. Anna meets Hugh, played by Michael Petrovich, and develops a friendship with him, which soon blossoms into a whirlwind romance. And once in full bloom, Hugh confirms that their relationship is more than just an affair. They are both madly and passionately in love with one another. Kindred spirits, a match made in heaven, doted and devoted, doing everything together, hiking, cycling, a dirty vacation in Scotland. Yeah, like I was going to show a screenshot of that. And all of this goes on for half an hour. An entire third of this movie is simply a romantic drama, and it really makes its point. These two are very much in love. This includes a couple of passionate bedroom scenes that go on for quite a while and are a tad explicit. Nothing compared to that of Virgin Witch, but still, you wouldn't want to watch this one with your mum. At least in this movie it has a bit more meaning. You know, we get it, they're lovers. Anyway, first spoiler, and if you go into this movie knowing nothing about it like I did, Hugh just dies. Like, out of nowhere. And the way he dies is so abrupt. It honestly took me by surprise, and I'm not even sure if a real diagnosis is explained. He's full of life one second, then immediately dead the next, and just like Anna's character, you feel that intense shock. This is the first part of the horror side of things, and where the horror is different. Anna's pain and agony for losing a significant other is so real and raw. She's also still residing in their holiday cottage in Scotland. Her head's in a spin. What does she do? Second spoiler. During the night, Anna hears footsteps from outside the cottage and sees a silhouette walk past her window. She bravely opens the door to investigate and finds only Hugh, alive and kicking. Well, not quite. He's basically a walking corpse and doesn't speak at all. The story explains that he's actually possessed, as in he is dead, but his body is possessed. Not in the same way as movies like The Exorcist or anything like that. I don't think it's a demonic possession. I think the movie tries to explain that he's possessed by a manifestation of Anna's love. As in, she loves him so much she simply cannot let him go, and her love is so powerful it's controlling his body. I don't know, it's meant to be symbolic. Anyway, that's the second part of the horror, Hugh's walking corpse, that actually starts to decay over time. I'll defend that this is a good movie, but I do admit it's far from perfect. The story is not told particularly well, and I get the impression that the book is much better. Some of the pacing is off, and a remake would probably do the story some justice. But a lot of the movie is filmed in Jersey with some wonderful shots, which is nice. And the horror comes from the turmoil of losing a loved one and the struggle of letting that loved one go. Again, a different kind of horror, but for some people in this world, this is a real living hell. Maybe I'm just soft, but I found this to be powerful and moving. Just in case you haven't seen it, I won't give away the ending, but let's just say it's also very symbolic.
Number 5.
Doomwatch, 1972. Doomwatch was originally a sci-fi TV series produced by the BBC about a scientific government agency who dealt with environmental issues such as radiation and pollution and so on. I have never seen a single episode, but if you guys have, let me know what it's like. Tell me in the comments. However, TIGON made a feature-length movie of Doomwatch, also titled Island of the Ghouls. And though still mostly science fiction, some horror and mystery elements were added. And if you ask me, it's pretty good. Dr. Del Shaw, played by Ian Bannon, is a member of Doomwatch, sent to the island of Balf to investigate the spillage of a dumped oil tanker. The island is inhabited by a small population of villagers who live an old-fashioned lifestyle, alienated from the rest of the world, and are unwelcoming and antisocial towards outsiders. Over time, the villagers display strange behaviour and are becoming aggressive, even towards each other. Meanwhile, Dr. Shaw, with the aid of Victoria, played by Judy Geeson, discover the fish in the local waters are abnormally large and having an effect on the villagers who have been eating them, first altering their behaviour, causing them to be violent and dangerous, as well as deforming their physical features with an outbreak of acromegaly. Acromegaly is a condition where the body produces too much growth hormone, causing parts of the body to grow quickly and abnormally large. This movie gives me big Wicker Man vibes, not that it's folk horror or anything. But a man visiting a strange island inhabited with unwelcoming folk who are set in their ways is very reminiscent of the Wicker Man. I absolutely love the village on this island. It's like a little harbour. It's so oldie worldly, with its little convenience store, a police station managed by a single police constable, a church and a pub. I've mentioned the pub in this movie before in another video, feel free to check that out. I believe some of the locations were filmed in Cornwall. If someone could confirm that or correct me if I'm wrong in the comments section, I'd really appreciate that. Ian Bannon and Judy Geeson have a great on-screen chemistry, and the whole mystery of what's happening on this island and why the people are so quirky is incredibly intriguing to watch. There's perhaps more mystery than horror in this one, but the effects taking place on the people of this island are quite horrific, and the makeup effects are pretty good too, especially considering the movie's low budget. Despite being a typical running time of an hour and a half, once this movie has made its point, it does drag a bit towards the end. I know it would have made for a short movie, but cutting 10 or even 15 minutes off wouldn't have bothered me. Otherwise, I think this is an interesting film with a bit of mystery and entertaining too.
Number 4.
Curse of the Crimson Altar, 1968. Also known as the Crimson Cult, this one boasts an impressive cast with the likes of Christopher Lee, Boris Karloff and Barbara Steele. All icons of horror in their own right, and though their names top the bill, no doubt to sell the movie, their roles are on the small side, though still significant. The lead role is given to Mark Eden, who plays Robert Manning. In search for his brother, he is led to a remote country manor, home of Morley, played by Christopher Lee, and daughter Eve, played by Virginia Wetherell, on the night of a local celebration where the reenactment of a historic witch burning takes place. The witch known as Lavinia, played by Barbara Steele. Robert is invited to stay as long as he likes until his brother is found, but during the night he experiences vivid hallucinogenic nightmares where Lavinia the witch takes centre stage. I'll admit, this movie has errors, and some unusual decisions are made. There are a lot of things wrong with it, but all of that is outweighed by some fairly good moments. First of all, seeing Christopher Lee and Boris Karloff sharing scenes and dialogue is an absolute treat. They both played Frankenstein's monster at one point. Karloff does look old in this movie and shows genuine signs of physical deterioration, but still delivers his lines with pure enthusiasm. Barbara Steele's screen time is short enough to be considered a cameo role, but the role of Lavinia the Witch is still an important one. The legend of Lavinia is an interesting one, and the annual witch-burning celebrations gives her character a legendary status. Michael Gough is also in this movie. He plays a servant called Elder who keeps trying to warn Robert his life is in danger and that he should leave while he still can. Then there's the nightmare scenes that really are a vision of horror. Excellent choices of colour and lighting, with some unnerving characters and bizarre circumstances. I won't ignore that this movie has many flaws, but I still deem it a classic.
Number 3.
The Creeping Flesh, 1973. Of all the films in my list, this one probably feels like a Hammer horror movie the most. After all, it features Hammer favourites Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, as well as directed by Freddie Francis. Peter Cushing is Professor Emmanuel Hilden, and he's just returned from Papua New Guinea with an incredible discovery: the entire skeletal remains of a giant, undiscovered humanoid being. After many tests and experiments, the professor removes a finger from the specimen and learns very quickly that when exposed to moisture, the finger rapidly grows new flesh. He also theorizes that his discovery is an evil ancient being that once roamed the earth amongst other creatures of the same. The professor's brother, James, played by Christopher Lee, attempts to steal the skeleton for his own greed and selfish gain. But wouldn't you believe it, it only starts to rain. The creature, exposed to an excessive amount of water, becomes bound in flesh with a new lease of life, in search for its missing finger. Don't laugh, this is serious stuff. I'll come clean and say, yes, this one's a bit corny, and there's more to the story than I've just shared, with some odd decision making. Like Professor Hilden giving a poorly tested serum containing the creature's blood to his own daughter. But on the whole, this one's fun and entertaining, with some great looking scenes, especially towards the end. A real monster movie with true horror visuals. The story also has quite an interesting outcome, but I'll say no more. And Peter Cushing, as well as Christopher Lee, give the performance you would expect from these iconic stars. Compared to the previous movies on my list, so far this one for me is the most rewatchable and pleasing.
Number 2.
Witchfinder General, 1968. How many of you thought this was going to be number 1 on my list? It actually was. When I first put this list together, this originally was my number 1 pick, but I made a last minute decision to change that with reason that I will explain later. But still, number 2 is high up on the list, and with good reason. This movie is also known as The Conqueror Worm, or Matthew Hopkins' Conqueror Worm. Based in the year 1645, Vincent Price plays the evil witchfinder Matthew Hopkins, alongside his cruel and vicious sidekick John Stern, played by Robert Russell. 2 real-life characters of history who existed during the English Civil War, travelling between various towns and villages to torture confessions out of people who were falsely accused of being witches, before sentencing them to a barbaric and painful execution. This movie also follows the story of a young, beautiful girl, Sarah, played by Hilary Dewar, who, in order to prevent the execution of her father, she allows Matthew Hopkins to take advantage of her body and satisfy his sexual lust, only for her attempts to be in vain, as the Witchfinder and his assistant typically carry out their evil duties. Though featuring 2 real characters of history, the story is a fictional one, but still based on actual events that took place during its time. And I think this is what makes it a real horror movie. Some may argue this is more of a period drama or thriller, and admittedly that's how I feel whenever I watch it, which is why I made it number 2 on my list, despite being an incredibly gripping and entertaining movie. And yeah, I still consider it horror, folk horror to be exact. In my opinion, this is one of Vincent Price's finest roles, and one of his best movies. The horror comes from the fact that the horrendous events that take place actually happen to real people in history. People living on the edge in case they were ever accused, sometimes put on trial with no hope of victory, before being tortured and killed, all on display for others to witness. Simply horrendous times. Honestly, I think it's a magnificent movie, and one that competes with some of the best Hammer horror movies out there. Hey horror fans, this video is sponsored by Zealous Rebellious Clothing, who believe in encouraging self-confidence, self-expression, and the pursuit of passions without compromise. Based in North Wales, they use their passion for classic cars, music, film, and societal non-conformity to inspire their designs, with hoodies, t-shirts, hats, and much more in men's, women's, and kids' sizes, using only quality materials and prints. Be different, be rebellious. Zealous Rebellious Clothing. Check out their website, Facebook page, and other socials. Links in the description below. Before I reveal my number 1 choice for very best TIGON horror movie, I'd like to give a couple of honourable mentions. The Sorcerers from 1967 follows characters played by Boris Karloff and Catherine Lacey, who manage to hypnotise and manipulate a young man. Researching this movie, I wasn't sure if TIGON made it or distributed it. Wikipedia currently lists it as a movie produced by TIGON, but their information states it was merely distributed by TIGON. Also, I didn't see TIGON listed in the credits anywhere, so just to play it safe, I'll give it an honourable mention at least. Though, to be fair, I didn't think it was a particularly good film anyway. The Body Stealers from 1969 is also known as Invasion of the Body Stealers, which sounds very similar to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a fantastic and far superior movie. This, however, may be considered horror by some, but it's absolutely not. It's science fiction, and, well, each to their own, but I thought it was absolutely awful. Lucky to get an honourable mention, in fact. So here it is, my number one choice for what I consider to be the very best TIGON horror movie.
Number 1.
The Blood on Satan's Claw, 1971. Do I seriously consider this to be better than the Witchfinder General? Actually, no. I think the Witchfinder General is a better movie overall, but I believe The Blood on Satan's Claw is a better horror movie. The elements of horror in this one are done very well, with its demonic presence, wonderful visuals, and a truly scary vibe throughout. It's difficult to give a synopsis on this one as so much happens in it, and the story is extremely convoluted. Basically, it's set in 17th century England, and Patrick Wymark plays the role of the judge of a country village that's encountering a strange and evil phenomenon where some of the younger residents are experiencing demonic possession and changes to their behaviour and appearance, such as insanity, fur on their skin, and in some cases a claw. Before long, this results in people being killed, and the judge ventures on a quest to prevent more deaths and possibly a solution to all of the ongoings taking place within his village. The story is not told particularly well, in fact it's all over the place, and that's because it was meant to be an anthology movie made up of multiple stories. It was originally going to be called Satan's Skin, but a decision was made last minute to make this one big feature film, and as a result it feels a bit hashed up and doesn't flow very well. So why did I pick The Blood on Satan's Claw above Witchfinder General? Why did I make it number 1 on my list? Mostly because it is outrageously atmospheric and is constantly looming with dread. The demonic activities appear to be real and haunting, and the cinematography is truly splendid. Shots of rural English woodland and countryside, all set in the 17th century. It's folk horror once again, but with an evil paranormal presence. The characters too are interesting, and witnessing the ways they deal with this plague of evil is fascinating to watch. Linda Hayden plays the role of Angel, considered a young sweet schoolgirl, is also a ringleader for all of the chaos taking place. Just stuff like that, I absolutely love it. People will have mixed opinions on this one, I have no doubt. It certainly has its pros and cons, but I believe the pros outweigh the cons substantially in this one, and is deemed a classic within the folk horror subgenre. It's a movie I personally enjoy very much, and I can easily watch it time and time again. But what are your thoughts? Anyway folks, that is my list for the top 10 very best TIGON horror movies. What do you think? Do you agree with the movies on my list? Do you disagree? Please let me know in the comments section below. And feel free to write your own list down there. I'd love to see what you guys would put in your top 10. So again, let me know down there. Do you believe any of the TIGON movies are as good or even better than some of the Hammer horror movies? Let me know. Speak to me guys. I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, that's all we've got time for in this episode, and until next time. I don't know who they are, But if you don't subscribe, they will get you. So make sure you are indeed subscribed. Click that notification bell so you don't miss out on any new video here on Monster Gab. Like the video if you did indeed like it. Share this with your friends and leave that comment down there. Thank you so much for stopping by. Take care. See you soon. Bye bye.